Welcome, welcome, welcome. I cannot tell you how excited we are to have this special day of recognition for our long-timers who have 25 years or more. As I said earlier, and it sounds like you guys have found things to talk about, you've been having a good time. We've got coffee and cake. And we are in the process of getting, we have tea, don't we? We have tea and cookies and cake, and we are in the process of getting coffee. So, it's here? Good. It's the serenity to accept the things you can't change thing that I've been working on, you know? Okay. Let's see here. Well, any of you who have more than 25 years, make sure that you have a hat. Bonnie, stand up. For those of you, turn around. Maybe most of you can see that. We want everybody with 25 years or more to have a hat. And so you can get that at registration. If somehow we missed you, we apologize. Our hope for this afternoon is that we will have a wonderful time. We've asked 6 people that we know that have 25 years or more that live in the area to come up and share. And we've given them a whole 8 minutes. I think that's enough, don't you? Each, you know. So I think they can fit their time in that 8 minutes. Hope so. Let's see. Let me find the podium packet here. Okay. Our preamble says, Alcoholics Anonymous is a fellowship of men and women who share their experience, strength, and hope with each other, that they may solve their common problem and help others to recover from alcoholism. The only requirement for membership is a desire to stop drinking. There are no dues or fees for AA membership. We are self-supporting through our own contributions. AA is not allied with any sect, denomination, politics, organization, or institution, does not wish to engage in any controversy, neither endorses nor opposes any causes. Our primary purpose is to stay sober and help other alcoholics to achieve sobriety. We do hope that most all of us know about our anonymity statement, and I do not have that written in front of me. But if you're going to take photos, please make sure that you ask anyone that you're taking the photo of, that you get their permission. Another little piece is, for those of you who carry cell phones or pagers, would you just take a moment and make sure they're turned off? It is not surprising to me that we have more women trying to get in this room than we have chairs, we think. If there's an empty seat next to you, would you please raise your hand? So that, this is how to tell when you're an old timer. Long timer. You know, that's a discussion. That's an issue. It's almost an outside issue. Actually, I think this came out of like one of our books. So it's easy enough to tell when you're getting old. For a start, you prefer to call it middle-aged. But you know you've had it, for example, when you're waiting at the bus stop and thinking about this nice young fellow standing there, and when the bus arrives, he stands aside to let you on first. Or young people call you Mrs. or Ma'am. You know you're getting older. Being an AA old-timer, though, is another trip altogether. You need to be old. Today, anything over 35 qualifies, is what it says here, but for us, we're doing 25. And you need to have put some time on the program. You might begin to suspect that you're inching into old-timer status if, say, you're at a meeting and the secretary is late, and everybody automatically looks at you to start the meeting. It's a nice feeling, of course, but there's a tinge of uneasiness mixed in with it. You know you're getting there, too, when the people you sponsor say, "You're like a mother to me." Sometimes you want to hit them, but you know they mean well. You know for sure you're an old-timer when you're sitting at a meeting and listening to this young person talk, and she says, "This old-timer told me," and suddenly you realize without any doubt that she's quoting some particular advice you gave her. You've been working away at the program, doing the usual jobs, being secretary, GSR, all that. Sponsoring, starting groups, only you never gave it much thought. You just did it. You never thought you'd get to be a long-timer. But now suddenly you are. You begin to feel you should know something, have some solid answers, now that you're an old timer, but you know that you don't. When you really boil it down, about all you can say is don't drink and go to meetings and it will all work out. Because it has. Only you get panicky thinking that you should know how this thing works. It takes a while to get over that idea. Once you become an old timer, about all you can look forward to is becoming a really old timer. Today, some kid looks in awe at an old timer and asks, "How long has she been around?" And you say, "When Bill W. started writing the book, she lent Bill the pen." And you hope that someday someone will be saying something like that about you. Because inside where it counts, you know that you've gotten so many benefits, such good feelings from this program, that being a really old timer wouldn't be so bad after all. I have a note that was paraphrased from an article by R.P. from the December 1979 Grapevine. So I loved it. I hope you guys did too. We're going to have 6 ladies speak. Like I said, we've given them lots of time, 6 to 8 minutes each. I don't think they need more than that. And we want to start out with the woman that actually has a lot of responsibility for having this convention here this weekend. She has just kept saying, "We should have it in Denver again, shouldn't we, girls?" And so she talked to the girls who did the bid, and we just love you so much, Ann. Ann Walls. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. I'm Ann Walls, and I'm an alcoholic. My sobriety date, is March 20th, 1954. And in March of 1954, if anybody had told me I would be standing in a room in the Adams Mark Hotel talking to a bunch of women drunks, I'd have said, "You're nuts. I'm not talking to nobody." I didn't get here by accident. I got here because I drank too much, and I got into a lot of trouble, and it was either get out of the trouble or find myself in Alderson for a short term. And you all know what Alderson was back then. It was a federal penitentiary for women. I had violated an expulsion order from Lowry Air Force Base. I thought I was bigger than the Air Force, and I found out I wasn't. Anyway, I stumbled up the steps at 1311 York Street on a hot August afternoon in 1953. And I went to the man at the desk, and he asked if he could help me, and I said, "Yes, I want to learn how to drink like other people." And he said, "Honey, we can't..." Excuse me. "We can't teach you how to drink like other people, but we can teach you how to live a happy, sober life." So I allowed as how I would just stick around and find out what this Alcoholics Anonymous stuff was all about. And I did for 7 months. And then I went to a party up at Camp Hale, and I had a bad headache. Nobody had any aspirin, and somebody said, "Have a drink." I said, "Okay." So I had 5 double shots. I did not get drunk. But Oh, the guilt. I had had enough guilt from my last drunk to last me to the end of my days. And I went back to York Street, and I wasn't going to tell anybody that I had gotten drunk because it was nobody's damn business but my own. And then I thought, well, you better tell somebody. So I called my sponsor, and I said, Petey, I got drunk Saturday night. What am I going to do about it? And she said, change your sobriety date. So I did. That's why it's March 20th, 1954, instead of August 12th, 1953. But I still remember the day I came to AA. It was August 12th. I have managed to be around the program, to be actively involved in the program ever since that March day. I have a sponsor who has more sobriety than I have, and she's here. The first day I was at York Street in August that year, Joe was working the desk, and she sort of was keeping an eye on me. And I started out the door because I was going to take a walk around the block and then come back and try and compose myself. And Joe saw me starting out the door, and she looked at me and she said, "Where do you think you're going?" And I said, "I thought I'd take a walk around the block." And she said, "You're not going anyplace. You get back in here and sit down." What I didn't know, because I was sort of non-compos mentis, was the fact that there was a bar just a block away. But Joe knew, and Joe knew drunks. She still does. And she said, "You just get back in here and sit down." So I went back in and I sat down and I went to my first meeting. I've gone to a lot of meetings since then. And I hope I've passed on some of the knowledge that makes me so damn mad. I hope I passed on some of the knowledge that Joe has passed on to me. I still actively sponsor women. And yes, I did prod Judy to bid for this conference. I prodded and prodded until she finally did. She still loves me. I'm not over yet. Oh no, well, that's true. It isn't over yet. She may not love me by the end of it. Have I talked 8 minutes? I have. Joe, it's your turn to talk.
Hello, everybody. My name is Jo, and I am an alcoholic. And I can't stand up, please excuse me, or I'd fall on my face, although I have done that before. But I would hate to do it this afternoon in front of you. It's wonderful to be here. And I thank God. Now, Anne's got me crying. In any event, my story begins when I was born, and they only gave me 8 minutes, so I can't tell you the whole story. But something was happening in the United States when I was born, which had an effect on my life and my drinking. And that was when Congress passed a law amending the Constitution, which made it illegal to manufacture, sell, deliver alcohol. Now, my father was a drinking man, and always he had been drinking in saloons, but that was over. So he started making beer, and it was bubbling behind the stove all the time. And in the summertime, we'd be out picking choke cherries and elderberries or any other kind of thing we could get to make wine. And he had a theory that if we learned how to drink at home, we would never have trouble on the outside. Now, I'm not blaming him because in many ways, this man was a much better parent than I. But in any event, he had alcohol on the table and felt that it was perfectly okay if we drank. On Saturday night, the whole family gathered except my mother, and we siphoned that old green beer into bottles. And by the end of the week, it was gone, and we were ready to start all over again. In any event, my drinking started at that point. You know, some kids come home to cookies baking in the oven, but with me and my sisters and brother, we'd come home to the smell of that old green beer bubbling in the back of the stove. And that meant we were home. You know, the drinking got worse little by little, and I can remember passing out the first time when I was 16. And I think then I had a problem. I do now, but of course then I didn't think anything was wrong. Nobody said anything to me except my mother, and she was upset. But my father didn't mind. He thought that was probably okay, and so that was really the beginning. He and I didn't have the same kind of attitude about dating either. And I liked boys very much. And I can remember on one occasion he threw one of these guys off the front porch, and this really upset me. And I decided that I knew best, and so I married the first young man that asked me. And God help him, he had no idea what he was getting in for. And thank God it was him, because he saved my life in lots of ways. We had 2 children. And of course, my drinking got worse, and Saturday nights always meant a binge, start of a weekend, and I'd have at it again, and it got worse. And finally, he said, "I'm not going to drink with you anymore." And I said, "Thank God, then I can drink by myself, and I won't have to answer to you anymore." So this went on until it was binge drinking. And I had an opportunity to go out to California on a trip, and I should have been gone about 4 days, about the length of this conference. And I didn't get home for 2 weeks, and there was a lot of anger about this. And I was sick and shaky and miserable. And I forgot to tell you that where I worked that year, I had a lot of problems, shaking and, just being nervous and all kinds of female problems. And so when I got home, these female problems were really extended into something quite serious. And this bunch that I had worked with gave me, in 1 year, 3 AA books at different times. And I thought, how could they think that I'm an alcoholic? And so I took the book, each one, and took it home, wrapped it in newspapers, and hid it in the dresser drawer. But when I came home from this trip, there was a lot of talk about divorce and being through, and I'm going to take the kids, and blah, blah, blah. So I decided that perhaps I ought to call this group called Alcoholics Anonymous, and I did. And I told him, I have a friend, and I went on to describe her. And after some time, this wonderful lady on the other end said, "Joe, why don't you just come on down?" And so I went, and they were wonderful. I will never forget that experience. It was like coming home, and I have been that way ever since, except I didn't stay sober. I listened to their stories, and I thought, Well, I haven't been in jail, and I haven't been down in Pueblo, so therefore I must be okay. I don't have this problem. But I love them so much, I decided to go back. And I made it for 2 months, and I loved every minute of it. Well, at the time, I worked for the Retail Clerks Union, and there was a lot of drinking went on. And in 2 months, we had organized the May Company, which used to be down the street from here. And we were going to have a celebration. So we went to the old Shirley Savoy, who was gone long ago, went into the bar, and everybody ordered a drink but me. And I ordered soup. And they put the soup down in front of me, and everybody else had a drink. And I thought, well, I'm not so sure that I can't handle a drink. So I pushed the soup away and had a double shot. This was around September, October, along and through the fall. And I got home about New Year's. And and this was the story of the drinking. And every 2 months I'd be drunk again for at least a couple of weeks, and I'd always go back to AA, and they were wonderful, always willing to accept me back, and they were very sweet and good to me. So I went back every time. But at the end of the road, I had come to a place where I wasn't getting home. I was sick all the time. I had been to doctors complaining about my female troubles. And so I got home that time, sick and sorry, and my husband said, look, we're through. I'm taking the kids and we're going to leave. And so we packed the kids up and off they went. I have never been so sick in my life. I remember I could not sit down, I could not lay down, I could not read, I could not eat, but I paced. And I thought about me and how hopeless I was. I used to stand in the mirror before that, coming off a drunk, looking at myself in the mirror and calling myself every dirty name in the book. And I really wanted to stop, except I didn't understand how difficult it was or what I could actually do. But in any event, that night started my sobriety. And I remember everything about that room, the floor covering, the walls, everything. And I paced. When my husband left, he said to me, now, I'm going to be home in a couple of weeks and I want you out of here. I had begged him, let me stay, I have no money. And he said, all right, you can stay, but please don't sleep in my bed. And please don't burn the house down. And don't bring any of your drunken friends in here. And so the night started with the pacing and the days started after. And I remembered a lot of things that I had learned in AA, that the worst of us, the very worst, can stay sober one day at a time, 15 minutes at a time, if necessary. And for me, it was really 15 minutes. I remember during that week, a friend of mine who drank with me came up with a bottle because she felt sorry for me. And I thought, I have to get her out of here because I know I'm going to take a drink if she doesn't go. So I almost pushed her out the back door. And she went reluctantly, but nevertheless she went. And so I managed to stay sober. I have been dry since that period of time. I don't know that I was sober because I didn't understand anything, except I began to understand that I was powerless and hopeless, and there was one who had all power, and that people in AA had told me about this, and that it would work for me if I asked. At that time, there were a lot of Skid Row people, and God knows they had a terrible time, and they're really down. And I'd look at them, and their eyes would change. They'd go to meetings, and they'd look different. They began to eat. They began to socialize with us, and they looked different. And something was at work in their lives, and I wanted that. And since that time, I have it. I think my time is growing short. And I began to understand a lot of things about this power greater than oneself and living one day at a time. And that everything changes no matter how bad it is. A drink is a drunk and a drunk is no out. And that the basic and wonderful thing that happens to us is love. To me, the will of God is expressed in my being just and honest in all my dealings with everyone in my life, and to love tenderly And that doesn't mean just anybody that looks good at that time. It means everybody. Even if you don't like them, there's something good about them. And you pray for them. And in addition to that, that business of being just and living with tender love is to live in the presence of God. And thank God that has happened to me. He's here today with us. A lot of things have happened to me, and you know, the golden years are sometimes very brassy. But you know, accepting is not so bad. And I have discovered that life is sweet, even with a chair. Anyway, it's good to be here, and I love you all, and you're so beautiful. Thank you.
We're going to take just a minute. We're going to set some chairs up. We think we have some long-timers in the back room with 25 years or more. We would like you to ask you to, we've got about 20 chairs set up here. There's two other pieces of information. We have a woman here celebrating 27 years today. Do you want to stand up? Thank you. We have two long-timer books. We mentioned this, we have two AA books. We mentioned this earlier. They're now going to be right outside the door. We're asking all the long-timers, please, before you leave, would you try to remember to stop and sign them? We've gotten a lot of you, but not everybody. There's approximately 100 long-timers in this room. Okay. Mary R. will be our next speaker. Somebody needs to turn off those cell phones.
My name is Mary Roush, and I'm a recovering alcoholic. What did you do to this podium? It's just, what an honor. Let's do it this way. Yeah. And how exciting to be able to be here at all, much less to be here and see all of you. And it's been so wonderful to renew friendships with people that I haven't seen for a long time. And Shirley, who just had 27 years, I remember her first meeting. I'm here thanks to the program of AA and my God. My sobriety date is January 11th, 1968. And when I moved to Denver, I wanted to be Joe Wright. But that's another story about the women who were here before I moved to Denver in '74. I just want to go back to a date as I think about all of this. The date was March 31st, 1967. And by then I'd had it. I'd had enough alcohol, and I'd had enough pills, and I'd had enough enabling by well-meaning people who said, here, you know, you take these pills and you won't have to drink. And that's how I got here originally, was the mixing of pills and alcohol. So I was fortunate. My addiction went rapidly, and I didn't die first in those 6 years. But I was so lost that day, I had called my doctor that morning. I said, I don't want any more pills. Isn't there somebody that can help me? I don't want to drink. And he said, well, okay, so there's a phone number of a new program over in Norristown. This was in Philadelphia. And you can go over and talk to them. Well, I made an appointment for 7 o'clock that evening. And I did not drink that entire day. I'm going to go get help. And I went in and I sat across from a man who looked very nice. And he just said, and who are you? And I said, well, I'm Mary Roush. And he said, no, well, who are you? Well, I'm Mrs. R.D. Roush. No, who are you? Well, I'm the mother of Karen, Kathy, Chris, Kim, Mike, and Kay. And I wasn't getting the right answer. And I was brought up to get it right. Never make a mistake, you know? Save face and be a lady at all times. Well, forget that. I was the daughter of, I was the sister of, I was all the way to being a bass in a Sweet Adeline quartet. And he was very nice because he knew I was getting uncomfortable because I was saying to myself, I went all day today without a drink and I need one right now. And he could tell my discomfort and he says, oh no, he says, I just don't think you understood the question. You are yourself and that's okay. And I said, oh, well, of course. I mean, doesn't everybody know that? I didn't. And there were some men around a table in the back of this big room, and they were laughing and talking. And he said, you see those people back there? And I said, yeah. He said, they're alcoholics. They're having a meeting. And I thought, no way, they were laughing. They couldn't have been alcoholics. Well, that was my initial appointment, if you will, with a clinic that I continued to go to until I was decreed to be an alcoholic, July 26th of that year. When this doctor had the nerve to tell my husband that I had crossed that line. And I thought, I'll show them. I won't drink. That was the beginning. But the main thing back to that March 31st, after I left that man and I drove home that evening, I'll never forget the road, the darkness, and the awareness, because I was replaying that conversation. It had really disturbed me. I mean, what was all this about? And I know what he said, but I said to myself, well, who is myself? And in that instant, I saw a little 6-year-old girl named Mary Helen who was standing on her grandfather's porch with her polka dot dress, carrying her Shirley Temple doll, with a very strange, confused look in her eye. And I remember saying to her, where did I leave you? I don't know where, but I'm going to find you again. Because I've become so busy by age 36 being somebody else's something, and I had no idea who I was. But one person in the world said whoever that was, she was okay. And that was hope. And that was the hope that brought me to this program and that kept me coming back. That man died 2 years later as the results of a fire started when he was under the effects of alcohol and drugs. He also 13th stepped me. That's another story. But when I look back at Mary Helen and where she started and what brought her here today, I thank you because you loved me back to life. And you helped me find me. And I have followed people like us from Philadelphia to St. Louis, to Denver, to Estes Park, and now to Tucson, Green Valley, Arizona. Yeah. And back again. And by the time I got to Denver, I decided I wanted to learn more about helping in this field. And I went back to school and I saw people like Joe Wright, who was a beacon in the helping community here in Denver. And there was another woman named Bonnie, and she's been gone quite a while. But these were the women that I watched. And got back into working in this field and have had the privilege of being able to work with families. And I have, when you talk about the family illness, this is the subject nearest and dearest to my own heart because of the recovery in my own family, my own 6 children, my husband, we're still together. The first 2 years, I wanted to drink or die or divorce. And it was because of a really beautiful sponsor who kept us going and said, I think there's something there to build on. Because I'd had 10 years before I became addicted. And we had to really go back and start from scratch. And it was painful. It was awful. And I somehow, thank you, God, we've made it. But one night after we'd been to our spouse and spouse group, you know the one I was in. We would go to these groups on Monday night. At least we'd both get in the same car with the windows open. And we wouldn't speak to each other, but we'd go to our groups, and then we'd get back in that same car, and we'd stop at Howard Johnson's for a hamburger on the way home. And then we would talk about what happened in our groups. We couldn't talk about ourselves. But one night he said to me, "You don't know what it's like for me to be married to 3 different women. The one you were, the one you became, the one you're becoming." On September 8th, we celebrated our 50th wedding anniversary. And I've sort of retired and semi-retired and all of that, and I'm fortunately able now, I'm back working with families again in a treatment center in Tucson. And it's just come full circle. And I need to share with you how wonderful it is to be able to know this program works. And I have an opportunity to share it with somebody else if they want it, if they don't want it. It's what we have, it's what's gotten us here, and it's what I am so forever grateful for. And I thank you for your part in my life. Thank you.
It's an honor and a privilege to introduce each one of these ladies. But the one that's going to talk next is really special to many of us who live in Colorado Springs. She's very special to me, and she's not my sponsor, but I do call her a grand sponsor, and I certainly call her anytime I have a question, and that's fine with my sponsor to do that. Phil, I love you. Come on up.
Hi, everybody. My name is Phyllis Carmichael, and I am an alcoholic. My home group is the Friday Women's Group of Colorado Springs. My sobriety date is November 18th, 1970. I did not come from an alcoholic home. In fact, it was a very healthy home. But there was something wrong with me way before I ever took that drink, because nothing was ever enough for this kid. I had all the love and everything that a normal person, quote normal, would ever want. But it was never, never enough for me. When my mother would hold me, it seemed like everything was okay. But the minute those arms dropped, there I was again, looking for something, wondering, is this what life is all about? Now, this was when I was, I don't know, about 9, 10, somewhere around there. I came from a German family, so my father made homebrew, and we had it, but I really could take it or leave it. I didn't care that much about drinking at that time. I was what you'd call a late bloomer, I guess. Maybe I started some serious drinking when I was around 20, somewhere around there, give or take. I didn't think too much about alcoholism. I didn't need to particularly, but when my first husband drowned, that was a turning point for me. I became a very bitter person. I hated God. I hated everything that happened and everybody around me. And I was a taker. I mean, I used people, and when I got through with them, I threw them in the garbage heap. It didn't matter. I didn't feel guilty about it or anything. My drinking increased to the point that somebody said, you know, Phil, you become rather a nasty, foul-mouthed person when you drink. We never do see the truth about ourselves, I guess. I didn't pay a bit of attention. As it went on, I married a second time. And I married this man only for him to take care of me. I didn't love him. I was too selfish. I was too wrapped up in me. And to prove that there was nothing wrong with me, I decided to go to a psychiatrist and you know, so to pacify my husband, so to speak. I lied through my teeth. There were people around that could help me, but I lied. Never gave them a chance to help me at all. Nobody ever said, Phil, you're an alcoholic, or nobody ever questioned my drinking. I don't know if they didn't do that back in those days or whatever it was. So I thought, if you're not going to say anything, I'm not sure, so I'm not going to tell you. It's none of your damn business. You're the expert. You're supposed to find out about these things. That's the way it was. But I happened to have a friend who lived next door to me. We were in the military, stationed over in London. And she says, you know, you're wasting your spit going to these psychiatrists and counselors because you're not telling them the truth. Your problem is you drink too damn much and you cannot control it. Well, needless to say, I didn't speak to her for a couple days. I was really quite disgusted, but that was the first person who had the guts to tell me the truth. We rotated back to the States and went to Colorado Springs. And lo and behold, about 8 months or so later, who do you think comes? The same gal. Her husband was going overseas, and she was going to stay here and wait for him. But she came to my house specifically to drag me to AA. And I'll tell you, we had quite a hot time when she arrived. I had no idea that that was her big plan. In the 6 months that I hadn't seen her, 6 to 8 months, she had read up on alcoholism. She knew about the denial. She knew about everything. And finally, it got to the point where I told her, don't you think you better leave pretty soon? I think you're staying a little bit too long at my place. Because I was a home drinker and I had it hidden all over the house. And she always seemed to be there, you know. And people and things made me nervous, and I needed to have a drink. And there she'd be. She knew all about it. She'd pour me a cup of coffee. It'd be a half a cup because she knew I couldn't hold a whole cup. My fingers would everything, coffee went all over. And it was okay if I did that, but I sure didn't want her to pour me a half a cup of coffee. She says, I'll leave for Florida when you go to AA. I says, no way. She says, then I'm staying. I threw her suitcase out and be damned, she didn't pick it up and bring it back in again. She says, you know, Phil, I care too much for you to let you kill yourself with alcohol. And that's exactly what you're doing. So she says, regardless of what you do, you're not going to get rid of me. So we went to AA. She called to get the information. At that time, they didn't have that many meetings in the Springs. And the gal who answered the phone gave us the wrong information. On Wednesday night, the Alateens met at the same place. I thought, geez, they're awfully young to be alcoholics. Now, you have to see the contrast, because in those days we met in the old Musicians Union Hall. Now, these musicians looked like the people that discovered Pikes Peak. They were ancient. Now, here on the wall were these old-timers. Here were the young kids coming in. And I thought, I think you've had too much to drink, Phil. My God, you know, this is terrible. So finally, their sponsor came in and said, you know, was quite surprised to see us and suggested that we go down the road a ways and pick up the other meeting. And no way. I thought, well, here we are, just because she got the wrong information. Honey, you pack your bag and you go to Florida. I have done. I've come to a meeting. And he said, just a minute, let me ask the teenagers if you can sit in on their meeting. I thought, never would they ever let us sit in. Well, you know, they did. They absolutely did. And so that was my first so-called introduction to AA. She said that didn't count. So we went to our first Friday women's group. Now, I wasn't about to tell you who I was. None of your business. He mentioned that I was an alcoholic. I may have to do something about it. and I had no intention. I was deathly afraid to stop drinking, because by this time, I just drank at everything. Good feelings, bad feelings, whatever it was. In fact, I was like a zombie. And I was deathly afraid to feel anything. And I knew I would have to if I quit drinking. Now, I didn't realize this until quite a bit later. I just thought I didn't want you people telling me what to do. That was the excuse I used, but it wasn't the truth. So she introduced me. She says, "This is the alcoholic over here." She says, she's not saying anything, but anyway, this is her. This is her over here. This gal brought me my first big book. And I did go to a few meetings, and eventually she packed her suitcase and went to Florida. The amazing thing is I kept going back to those meetings. Because you said the words that I was hungry to hear. And that was that you loved me. You wanted me to be happy. You wanted me to learn how to live without alcohol. You said everything that I needed to hear. Now, I thought you probably had something up your sleeve. You know, I thought you were I don't know what in the hell I thought you were trying to do, but I didn't think you were very sincere because, you know, I wasn't. I put a price tag on everything I did for everybody. So I thought you were really kind of up to no good, but I was so hungry to hear it that I kept coming back anyway. Don't get close to me. Keep your hands off me. I don't want you near me. But I just wanted to be around people that said they loved me because I was so lonely. I thought I would die. And I know that was the turning point for me because I couldn't stand being that lonely anymore. It was killing me. It was killing me. And that was the turning point when I decided I'm going to try this program. I don't know if I can do it. I don't know if I can go a day without drinking. It's been a long time. I was used to being a loser, and losers have no responsibility. And I didn't think I could probably make it. Well, you know what these gals did from the Friday Women's Crew? They set up some kind of a schedule, and they'd say, you know, Phil, go and walk down Cheyenne Canyon. Look at the beautiful world God made for you, just for you. Go down and walk around. So I did. Then I came home and I wanted to drink. Jesus, my skin crawled. I wanted to drink. The phone would ring. One of the girls say, "Hey, Phil, have you gone down Cheyenne Canyon?" I said, "Hell yes, I just went down there." They said, "Go down again." So that's what I did. I did that the whole day. Going down the canyon, coming home, going down the canyon. I don't know what my neighbors were thinking. But that's how I stayed sober or dry, I'll put it that way. And somehow or other I knew if I could make it one day, I'd be okay. I could somehow make this program. I picked a sponsor. I got to look at what time it is, Lynn. You have to tell me. I picked a sponsor mainly because she belonged to the Sweet Adelines and she sang. And I loved to sing, so I thought, oh boy, we got something in common. See how sick my motives were? I didn't even know anything about AA. Well, let me tell you, don't judge a book by its cover. This gal said, "What do you expect of me, Phil?" I didn't know what to expect of her. I didn't have the foggiest notion. They told me to get a sponsor. I got a sponsor. She said, "Let me tell you what I expect of you. I expect you to call me every day." I thought, oh God, what'll I say? But she's, "I expect you to go to the Friday night step meeting religiously. I expect you to be able to follow directions. From time to time, I'll tell you what we're going to do. I'll surprise you." You know, every morning I'd get to that phone and I was just hoping and praying she's sitting on the toilet so she wouldn't talk. They didn't have cell phones in those days. And there she'd be, waiting for me. And finally she'd say, "You know, you remember so-and-so at the meeting? She was really hurting, Phil. Why don't you call her and wish her a nice day?" I know she was getting so sick and tired of me calling her. She was just trying to get me, you know, spread me around a little bit, I guess. Finally, it got to the point where she said, "Phil, have you ever listened to yourself talk?" I said, "Well, I guess so." And she said, "I don't think so, because if you did, you'd vomit because it's awful." She says, I never met such a negative person. She says, everything you talk about is negative. She says, I tell you what, we're out of the problem now. If you have anything to say it now, because we are through with the problem. We are going into the solution. I didn't know what that meant. So anyway, she says, the next time you call me, if it's not positive, I'm going to hang up on you. I thought, oh, that's pretty mean. She certainly wouldn't do that. Well, she did. She did. So every time I would call her, I would write down what I was going to say. I think that's pretty positive. I don't think she'll hang up on me again. I guess I never listened to myself, and I guess that's probably it. I talk so damn much, I never listened. But anyway, this gal was very service-oriented. She got me involved in service work. We went on 12-step calls. In those days, you went out to the house. You didn't haul them to detox. And she volunteered me to make coffee. She volunteered me for intergroup. She volunteered me, I don't know, for every damn thing in the world, you know. And in those days, they didn't have styrofoam cups. I washed cups and saucers until my hands were red. But, you know, every Tuesday night at Central was a big birthday meeting. And these Longtimers would get up and really talk, and afterwards they'd go down in the kitchen. And they'd have coffee in their saucers. You know, I don't think probably most of them never even had a saucer in their life, but they came to Central, they had a saucer. I had to wash them, naturally. But I heard an awful lot of good things. I learned from these guys. I listened. I knew very little about alcoholism, and to me today, that's not even necessary. I'm very glad I didn't know anything about alcoholism, because I learned everything out of the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. I didn't go into treatment. I came in off the streets. And today, and it's only my own preference, I prefer to sponsor somebody that comes in off the streets, so you don't have to wean them off the other talk. I think my time is up, isn't it, Lynn? So, thank you.
Lynn A., where are you? Lynn, there you are. All right. Astra. Hi.
Nice to be here. Thank you. I answer to all the letters. I've been Lynn A, Lynn B, Lynn C, Lynn D. You know how that goes. That's part of my story. But I'm not going to tell you about that. My name's Astrid Lynn Byron, and I am a recovered alcoholic. And it's through God and this program and the generosity and the service work of people like you that my brain has been changed, and I hope forever. I did not come to this fellowship voluntarily. I'm not a volunteer. I did not have any aspirations to either become a drunk or to sober up. When I arrived here, I was brought here. And I was brought here in a basket with what was left of a human being. And I was a wreck. And I came to AA before it was socially acceptable to belong to AA, or anybody even knew about it. In fact, it was a secret society. You had to know somebody who knew somebody who knew somebody who knew somebody. And that's what happened to me. My father-in-law was a man who was involved in the legislature, and he sat next to a woman named Frona McCambridge, who's passed on now, so I can give you her name. At that time, she had 20 years of sobriety.
And he told my story for me. I didn't need to tell anybody. I didn't need to qualify for this fellowship because he told her what I was like. And she said, sounds like your daughter-in-law is an alcoholic and she probably needs AA. He said, what's that? Now, he didn't tell her about my husband, who was also a drunk. No. He didn't tell about all the friends we had that were alcoholic. No, just me. I was the cause of all the problems in the whole family, probably in the whole world as far as he was concerned. So it was through that contact with an Al-Anon coming from an alcoholic that I was introduced to a doctor who was in AA, who has passed on, and I can give you his name too, is Dr. Ed. And I went to his office, and his office was downtown in the old Republic building. And the only thing I remember about it, my recollection is not real good about what people said or what people did for me in the early days. But I'm a visual person, and I do have visual memories. And this old building had an elevator that was a cage. Do you remember that? And it went up and down, and it just had wire on the side of it. And I remember being in that cage on my way to see the doctor. And I was terrified, just terrified. And from that day, I was introduced to a member of AA, and I started to go to a home group. I did not get sober in that home group, but I made my contacts, and they planted the seed. So that when I finally did surrender, and finally did come to realize that alcohol was my master, and that I really truly wanted to get sober, I didn't know anything about alcoholism. I called one of these people, and they came and got me, and I started going to Alcoholics Anonymous for what I hope will be my last time. That was on June 1st, or thereabouts. Marcy and I one time went over and looked at my chart over at the hospital, because I spent some time in the hospital before they had treatment centers. About 6 weeks, when I finally sobered up, I was in the hospital. I weighed 72 pounds. I was orange. I was all stomach. I had 2 sticks for legs. My eyes were yellow, and my husband was told I would never leave the hospital. And he went home, gave away my clothes, my car. If I had any jewels, he would have given them away too, but he had long since hawked my ring and a bunch of other stuff. But that's about, that was the first thing on my inventory. He hawked my engagement ring. To buy what? Booze for us. I saw the truth of that in spades. But from that day on to this, I've been attending meetings on a regular basis. And you know what the great joy of my life is? Talking to a new drunk. It is still the joy of my life. Not getting up here and claiming my spiritual progress or my years in this program, but talking to a new drunk. Because that is when I get to hear my story. That is when I get to hear, do I still believe that I'm hopeless? Do I still believe that I need God more than anything in this world? This past year, and I belong to a group which believes in going through the work once a year, and it's become increasingly difficult for me to find the reservations in my first step, because I know they're there. Because I know that in the back of my mind somewhere, that I still have the ability to drink, and that idea of taking a drink is still there. There is a part of me that still wants my ass on a bar stool, and I know it. I know it. But in my conscious mind, I do not want to drink, and I have every expectation of staying sober the rest of my life, as long as I rely on God and this program, and not on myself. This last year, when I went through the work, I got to the first step, and we generally review these on our own when we've been sober as long as I have. And so I reviewed my first 3 steps. before I started to write my inventory this year. And I didn't think that I had a whole lot to write about, and I really didn't. But as I got into it, I found some things to look at. But yeah, you're laughing. It's true. We still have the capacity not to like someone because they don't have the right color hair, or they don't have the right color blouse, or they don't eat their food right, or they don't talk right, or on and on and on and on. It gets to be pretty petty, but those are the things that get people drunk. And so when I looked at that first step, I thought, my God, I've passed the stage where I'm going to look at the idea of a little wine on my Sunday. Do you remember when we talked about that, going through the first step? Do you believe you could have a little wine on your Sunday with your Sunday dinner, for instance? And I would have to say, no, I don't. I don't believe I can do that. But that was so simple, that was such a simple thing, and it's so glaring, and it's always right there because you're always going out to dinner. You're always ordering food, and you're always careful that you don't order food with alcohol. At least I am, because in the morning I ask God not to let me drink and not to put it in front of me. Please don't put it in front of me, not even as an accident. And so that has worked. So I kept going over this first step, and everybody would say, have you done your first step yet this year? And I'd say, no, God dang, I can't get to it. I'm sober. I'm going to stay sober, and I just can't get to it. And then I decided to pray. When all else fails, you can always ask God. He's got all the answers, but he's got all the questions too. And the questions are sometimes more important than the answers. So I prayed and I prayed. I prayed on Sunday night, and Wednesday morning, someone came into my office, and we were talking about people with long-term sobriety, and he said, well, here's one for you, Lynn, because I shared this with people that I was struggling with this. I can't stay sober on the first step that I took 43 years ago. I've got to have one today. I've got to have something that means something today. So he said, well, here's one for you, Lynn. He said, not that you're showing any signs of it or anything, but what if you were to develop Alzheimer's? Oh, my God. It was like a knife. It was like a knife. There it was. Oh, my God. What if I did? What if I'm one of those people that's going to have Alzheimer's when I get older? Will I remember I'm a drunk? Will I remember to say the Serenity Prayer? Will I remember the 12 steps? Will I remember I'm a member of Alcoholics Anonymous in good standing? Or will that leave me? And I was terrified again. I was back in that first step. And I was thinking, boy, do I need God? Do I need God? And if that wasn't enough, the next day, just to make it real plain to me, that I'm not immune from drinking, a man came into the office and he set a package down on the table there, and he said, I don't know where this goes, but I was a secretary of this group many years ago, and I was a treasurer, and this is what's left of the money. He said, I found it in my garage. And I said, well, how come you waited 20 years to bring it here? And he said, well, I don't go to AA anymore. I said, oh, tell me about that. Because I think AA sometimes is a great interruption in my wonderful life, and I'd love to do that sometimes. I'd like to stay home for a month and read all those books I have there that I haven't read, or go to all those movies. I haven't even seen A Perfect Mind, Beautiful Mind, whatever it is. I haven't even seen that yet. And so he started to talk, and he said, well, I got real sick drinking, and what they decided to do when I was 10 years sober was a liver transplant. I said, oh, how does that work? He said, I'm like a new man. He said, I can have a drink now and then. I don't have the same liver. And the thought walks right into my head. That's what we need. I need a new liver. If I had If I could just somehow, if I had cancer of the liver or had a terrible disease, they could put a new liver in me and watch me go. And that scared me. And I was able to get to the second step and the third step, and I was able to write. And some of the things I wrote about are some of the things that are happening to me as I get older. I'm tired. I can't work as hard. I can't run around at night. A lot of things. And, you know, pills for your bones, pills for your stomach, pills for this, pills for that, you know. And now I've got osteo, and I have to take pills for that. And, you know, it just goes on and on. And so I made a decision this year to resign from my job. Well, as I made that decision as a result of going through the work and looking at where I really am in my life, I'm going to be 75. I think I've worked long enough. And although I have the best job in the world, I know that there's somebody that can come in there and do it. Now, Joe tells me that I can't come near the office for 6 months. So you probably won't be seeing me after June for about 6 months, but wait. After that, I'm going to become a delegate to the central office. I'm going to go back, and I'm going to start at the bottom, and I'm going to start bugging them like they bugged me for 29 years. I'm so grateful to be here and be with all of you. And lastly, I would just like to say to Judy, who was here, where is she? Oh, there's Judy. I would like to say thank you to Judy for all the hard work she's done. I know how hard it is to organize things of this size, and our hats are off to you. Thank you. God bless.
Just let me thank you. Thank you so much, Lynn. Let me take a minute and say, just for those of you who don't know, Lynn has been the service, is that what we call it? Central office manager in Denver for 29 years. We have one more speaker. I want to tell you what's going to happen here so that you know. We have one more speaker. Before that speaker, we're not right now, don't jump, but we're going to have all the long-timers stand up. I wish we had time for everybody to talk. We don't. So the long-timers are going to stand up. We'll recognize you as a group. And then we have one last speaker. And here is Bonnie F. And it was my privilege to meet Bonnie yesterday, I think, for the first time. It's becoming a blur, frankly. But Bonnie is the woman who chaired, Denver has had the International Women's Convention 2 times in the past, and Bonnie was our chair both times. Please.
Well, the mind will absorb only what the fanny will take care of, so you might as well stand up and stretch if you haven't. I don't know where to start. I'm not going to go into a long drunkalogue. I passed a long drunkalogue years ago. I now have a live-a-log. And most of my time right now is called recuperating time. It's been a very, very rough last year. I had a lot of loss in my family, including my mother, that I was dearly devoted to. And for all of you who still have mothers, you know, and don't have good relationships with them, my heart goes out to you. because it certainly leaves a void in my life. Today I ask myself a lot of things, and mostly it's about, is it well with my soul? And because AA was not a picnic for me. It is still not a picnic for me, okay? I learned a lot of things along the way, and I lost my way way long time ago. I started drinking when I was very young. I had a lot of abuse in my life, not only sexual, but physical, verbal, and emotional. And a lot of that hasn't been mentioned up here, but many of you have had the same thing. Also, there are a lot of women that have never recovered or never taken their little girl inside of them and love her because she's so special. You know, today I know that I was filled with fear and guilt, shame, and my life was out of control. You know, and all I did was feel sorry for myself because it was poor me all the time, or it was always something or somebody else. And it was never me. And it wasn't until I got into my inventory of writing it down that I began to see all of my selfishness, self-centeredness, and all the things that go with it. The outline, I need to say this because the outline in the book is not good enough for me. I have to go into the 4th and the 5th column, as the book talks about, immediately following the 3rd outline, because I view the first 3 lines to be excusing, denial, and blaming others. What you did to me causes me to be the way I am, and that's not true. My behavior, I've learned, comes about as the way I respond to everything that happens in my life. Now, I've been accused many times of being controlling, and I came to find out that each and every one of us is controlling. You know, but I thought I was so special that I was the only one, and it was a damage. You know, and because I had a lot of those. The worst thing for me is holding on to a resentment. And I have to get rid of that resentment, and I immediately sit down and pray to God and begin to work on it. And then when I find I've reached the point I've made my amends not only to myself, but to the person. And I have someone that I used to, well, not now, he's passed away also this last year, that I was told that when I get ready to make an amend that I was to write down what I was going to say. Never attack the other person, but always put it into your own feelings. We do have a feelings disease. My alcohol was to get rid of the pain of living and the pain of life. I could not deal with things appropriately, and I could not deal with things the way you wanted me to. Now, I've been criticized for that many times. I'm either all right or I'm all wrong. And in your perception, I have been wrong many, many times. And it seemed to be all right for me at the time, but then I learned that I had the right to change, and the right to change my attitudes and my behaviors. I don't push my fist through a wall when I'm angry or kick the wash machine or any of those things anymore. I learned that anger is a feeling and not a behavior. And when I try to direct it towards someone, I'm only destroying my relationship with that person, and I'm hurting myself so terribly. But that came through living life and working with people in this program. I dedicated my life when I came to this program to helping women, and I still believe it. It was back in the time, and these long-timers up here remember all the specialty meetings that we were not supposed to have. And I remember coming to Denver, and there wasn't a single woman's meeting in Denver. And I've been going to women's meetings in Cleveland for 8 years at that time. And I could not understand it. Well, now there are over 40 women's meetings in the state of Colorado. And that was a we thing. There were 2 other girls and myself that got together and thought we'd have some coffee, and talk about it. And that's how it all began. A meeting between 2 people or 3 people is a meeting with a lot of ideas and a lot of suggestions and no arguing. And when our first conference came here and crossed the Mississippi in '79, we had $500 and 1 year to put a conference on. And when I see where it is today, it blows me away. Gratitude, you bet. Gratitude, you bet. And what we learned out of that is when we are given the opportunity to be God's instrument in the lives of other women, it happens. It happens with a lot of hard work. It helps, if you have someone to talk to, like a good sponsor, and a sponsor that will direct you and guide you lovingly, and yes, rip you up one side and down the other. And believe me, all of those things have happened. As I said, it's not been a picnic. And all these other women that have talked have given you my drunkalogue. I'm no different than anybody else. It's just this, it's just the behaviors that may have been a little bit different. I'm no different than any of you. If you consider yourself a woman drunk, as I do, alcoholic woman to me is a cleaned up version of a dead drunk woman. And yes, it is socially accepted these days, some places, but there's still a stigma out there. Terrible. Terrible. I'd like to say to you that I have been working with a lot of African American women, in the Toledo area. And I'm telling you, the enthusiasm that those women have is unbelievable. The language, of course, is unbelievable, at times, And what I learned through all of that experience was Alcoholics Anonymous is not about whether you're black or white, Hispanic, gay, whatever. Because I get so tired of the gossip that goes around. And I also get so I shut up. I don't say a lot of the things openly like I used to say. And I don't tell you how to do anything. I will only be quiet and listen and then suggest that you might try it some other way. Because I was told that if it works for you, it might work for me. And it has worked for me for a lot of years, one day at a time, sometimes 1 minute at a time, sometimes hanging on with the knuckles, just hanging on. And I know that when God came into my life, there's a line in the book that talks about the fact, to relieve me of the bondage of self. That's one of my favorite lines. God could and would if he were sought. And he came in and took the drink problem from me. I had nothing to do. I made no decision. I don't understand that in the world when people say, I made the decision to stop drinking. Because our book says, that we don't make the decision, that God comes in his grace and his glory and his love and provides us with the steps of this program to lead us up the ladder to God. And it's only through God that I stand before you today, because I, like so many of you, tried to kill myself with my drinking and with overdosing. And he came in and said, no, girl. And I have been so grateful, ever since. And so today when I say, is it well with my soul? I know that when God wants me to do something, it's my responsibility. And believe me, I am so grateful and joyful. I'm not showing it today because I don't laugh out like I did, and I don't yell and holler and do kinds of things I used to do, because I've become a much more introspective and a much quieter person. I've had a lot of rejection. I've had a lot of different kinds of things in my life, and I've been away from the conference or away from Denver for 12 years. And every time I come home, I just fill up. I fill up. I'll tell you today, though, I got to say this. I got to break this seriousness. I came back today. When I came to you, I was 8 years sober. And I came back to you looking in the mirror with my knees frowning, waffle weave skin, but a spirit inside that I never had. And I would wish for each and every one of you that you will light your own candle and light your own light, because it's a brilliant, brilliant light of hope for so many, many women and young people out there that are still suffering and still struggling, not only with alcohol, period, but with poverty, I could just go on and on and on. And so many of us have seen so much of that. And accepting today and the ground that you're standing on today and where you are, as holy ground, because we're all here by God's grace. Tomorrow's too uncertain to be worried about all of that and all the planning. And anything in my life, that I have coming to me will come in God's time. I will constantly be learning. I will constantly be doing steps. I will constantly, most importantly, working on my 10th step, in order to review my day and see where I have hurt or harmed or where I have been selfish, dishonest, fearful, and all of the things that I need to work on. And believe you me, I can only speak for myself. I still today find things within me that keep coming up once in a while, because the book always says that more will be revealed. Okay? I'm sorry for those of you who haven't had the ability or the interest in writing out a fourth and fifth step. Because for me, it was a step in the future that I never ever dreamed, And I don't harp on it all the time. I just do it. I do it for me, and what I have, I may be able to pass on to you. Anyway, in accepting all of my defeats as a grace, I try to receive it and to accept it as a grace, and not as a whimpering, crying, sniffling little girl that I was for so many years. And I also would like to say to you that each and every one of you, I pray, will walk in God's dignity and in your own dignity and your own grace. Hold your head high and walk tall.